He had everything anyone could ever want. A huge apartment at the top of the city, cars that gleamed like mirrors in the sunlight, closets full of expensive clothes, and bank accounts that seemed endless. Yet every morning he woke up feeling a heaviness he could not shake. Money could buy comfort, but it could not buy the warmth he was missing in his life. After the breakup, his days felt longer and nights colder. The apartment felt more like a silent museum than a home, with the furniture and art around him reminding him of everything he had, but could not fill the emptiness inside. He would sit at the edge of his bed for long moments, staring at the city lights below, each window filled with the lives of people he didn't know but somehow envied. They had families, friends, laughter, and small struggles that made life rich in ways he had never truly understood. He remembered how it felt to have someone to talk to in the evening, someone to share dreams and fears with. That warmth had vanished suddenly, leaving a cold space that no luxury could fill. He spent hours at work, attending meetings, making deals, signing papers that only added numbers to his already impressive wealth. Yet each accomplishment felt hollow, like applause in an empty theater. He tried to distract himself with travel, new cars, and fine dining, but the emptiness followed him everywhere. Friends had started to drift away, unable to reach him behind the walls of money and pride he had built around himself. He had everything, yet it was never enough. One late evening, feeling restless, he decided to leave the apartment. The city streets were calm, lit by street lamps that glowed like fireflies in the distance. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of rain that had passed hours earlier. He walked without a plan, letting his shoes guide him through narrow alleys, wide boulevards, and quiet parks he had passed hundreds of times without noticing. The city felt different at night, quieter, almost reflective, and it mirrored the solitude he carried inside. As he walked, he tried to think about other things to distract his mind from the loneliness, but his thoughts kept returning to the past. Memories of laughter, shared dinners, late-night talks, and promises broken weighed heavily on him. He realized he had built a life that others envied, but in reality it was fragile. He thought of the people he had pushed away, thinking wealth was enough to fill the void, but it was not. It never was. Turning a corner, he noticed a park he had never really entered before. The trees swayed gently, leaves whispering in the soft wind. A few lights dotted the pathways, and the benches were empty except for a small figure sitting quietly in the distance. At first he thought it was a stray animal, maybe a lost dog. But as he got closer, he realized it was a child, sitting alone, knees pulled close, small hands clutching a worn-out backpack. The child looked around nervously, eyes wide and searching. When the child noticed him, there was a flicker of hope mixed with fear. The millionaire paused, unsure if he should approach. His mind raced with questions. Where were the parents? Was the child lost? Hungry? In danger? The instinct to help, long buried under layers of self-absorption, suddenly rose to the surface. He took a cautious step closer and softly asked, "Are you okay?" The child looked at him, and for a moment there was silence, as if deciding whether this stranger could be trusted. Finally, in a small, trembling voice, the child said, I don't have anything to eat. Can you help me?" Those words struck him harder than he expected. He froze, unsure of how to respond. Money had always given him a sense of power, control, and solution to any problem. But here, standing before a small, helpless human being, he felt powerless in a way he had never felt before. There were no rules, no contracts, no guidance. Just a child, hungry and alone, looking up at him with trust he had not earned yet. He swallowed hard and knelt down slightly to be closer to the child's level. "Of course," he said, his voice soft. "Let's get something to eat." The child's eyes lit up and a small smile appeared. He led the child to a nearby cafe that was still open. Inside, the smell of bread, coffee, and pastries filled the air. He ordered a simple meal, sandwiches and juice, nothing fancy, but enough to fill a small stomach that had gone hungry. The child ate quickly, occasionally looking up at him, shy but curious. He watched quietly, feeling something shift inside him. He had never noticed how little he truly understood life beyond his own walls. The joy in the child's eyes was genuine, raw, and it touched something deep within him. He realized that the smallest act of kindness could feel more powerful than any business deal or luxury purchase he had ever made. After the meal, they walked back to the park. The child's steps were lighter, and the fear seemed to melt away slowly. He asked questions, not about money or cars, but about simple things. Why trees lose leaves, why the sky is different at night, and why some people are so mean. Each question was a window into innocence he had forgotten existed. He listened carefully, giving answers as best he could, realizing he was enjoying the conversation more than he had enjoyed anything in months. He laughed quietly at some of the child's observations, and for the first time in a long time, he felt alive in a way wealth could not provide. The child paused on a small bridge that crossed a quiet stream. Looking down at the water, they whispered, "It's all I have, we can share." The words were simple, but they struck him with force. The child had almost nothing and yet offered what they had freely, without expectation, without fear. It was a lesson in generosity that money could never teach him. He realized that giving, sharing, and connecting were the true treasures of life. He nodded slowly, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yes," he said softly, "we can share, and I promise I will help you as much as I can." The child's eyes sparkled, and he felt a warmth spreading through his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the expensive clothes he wore or the gold watch on his wrist. It was human connection, pure and simple, something he had missed for far too long. They spent the evening together in the park, talking about small things, laughing quietly, and sometimes just sitting in silence, sharing the moment. He realized how much he had missed in his pursuit of wealth, the simple joys, the unexpected moments, and the bonds that truly matter. In the company of this small child, he felt a flicker of hope, a hint that life could be different, richer in ways he had never imagined. As night fell and the city lights reflected in the stream, he knew that this was the beginning of something important, not just for the child, but for himself. He had found a spark of purpose, a reason to care beyond the walls of his penthouse. And in that quiet park under the stars, he made a silent promise to himself to be present, to help, and to allow himself to feel again. For the first time in months, he walked back to his apartment with a lighter step, carrying the warmth of connection that money had never given him. The city that had seemed cold and distant before now felt alive, filled with possibilities he had never noticed. He understood in that moment that true richness was not counted in dollars or possessions, but in the hearts touched and the lives shared. And tonight, one small voice had reminded him of that truth, forever changing the way he would see the world. The next morning, he woke up with a strange feeling of anticipation. He thought about the child he had met in the park, and a warmth filled him that had been absent for months. After breakfast, he quickly dressed and decided to go back to the park, unsure of what he was expecting, but knowing he needed to see the child again. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was concern, but mostly, it was a deep desire to connect with someone who reminded him of what really mattered. When he arrived at the park, he saw the child sitting on the same bench as yesterday. The backpack looked even more worn, and the small shoes were dusty from walking. The child looked up and smiled faintly when he saw him. There was no fear this time, only trust. The millionaire walked slowly toward the bench, keeping a safe distance, giving the child the choice to move away or stay. The child stayed. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice a little hesitant. "Did you sleep okay?" The child nodded, eyes serious, then added, "I stayed at my aunt's house, but she was busy. She doesn't notice me much." There was a quiet sadness in the words, a heavy loneliness that reminded him painfully of his own recent heartbreak. He nodded, understanding more than he could put into words. He reached into his pocket and took out a small wrapped sandwich he had bought on his way. "I thought you might be hungry," he said. The child's eyes brightened and a small smile broke through the sadness. "Thank you," the child whispered almost shyly. He took the sandwich carefully, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. They sat together on the bench, sharing the simple meal. He watched the child eat quickly but carefully, noticing every small movement, every glance, every expression. It was the first time in a long while that he felt this close to someone, without any hidden agendas, without business or social expectations. The presence of the child made him feel lighter, as if some invisible weight was lifting from his chest. After the meal, he decided to walk with the child around the park. The child took small steps, occasionally looking up at him, sometimes glancing at the birds or the small fountain in the center. "Do you come here often?" the child asked timidly. He shook his head. "Not really," he replied. "I just needed to get out and think." The child nodded thoughtfully, understanding without judgment. There was a maturity in the child's eyes that surprised him, a kind of quiet awareness that he had not expected from someone so young. As they walked, the child talked about school, friends, and dreams. The stories were simple yet filled with hope. He listened quietly, asking questions here and there, realizing that each story, each word was a lesson in life he had forgotten. The child had a way of noticing things, of finding small joys in the ordinary, and it reminded him that happiness often came from simple moments rather than grand achievements. At one point, the child paused near a small pond and pointed to the ducks swimming calmly. "I like them," the child said softly. "They don't fight. They just float and eat and sleep. I wish life was that simple." He smiled, a genuine smile he had not felt in months. "Life can be simple," he said gently, "if we remember to enjoy the small things." The child nodded, looking at him with a quiet trust, and he felt a pang of protectiveness he had not known he could feel. They found a quiet corner of the park, away from the few joggers and late-night walkers. The child sat on the grass looking up at the sky. "Do you ever feel lonely?" the child asked suddenly, surprising him with the directness of the question. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," he admitted. "I feel lonely a lot. I have things, but I don't have someone to share them with, and I forgot how to be happy with just people around me." The child tilted the head slightly, as if considering his words. "I feel lonely too," the child said quietly. "But when someone shares with me, even a little, it feels like I'm not alone anymore." His chest tightened. He realized that the child's words mirrored his own feelings perfectly. Here was someone who had almost nothing, yet found a way to offer what they had. It was humbling and inspiring at the same time. He felt tears threatening to spill, but he blinked them back, not wanting to frighten the child. They continued walking, talking about their favorite stories and games, sharing laughter that felt like a long-forgotten melody. For him, the sound was healing. For the child, it was comforting. In that moment, the world outside the park, the busy streets, the flashing lights, the business meetings seemed distant and irrelevant. All that mattered was this shared space, these simple moments, and the beginning of a connection that neither had expected. As evening approached, he realized it was time to leave. "I should go," he said reluctantly. The child looked disappointed but nodded. "Will you come back?" the child asked. He smiled gently. "Yes," he promised. "I'll come back." The child stood up, holding the small backpack close. "Thank you," the child said softly, looking up at him. "I don't have much, but it means a lot that you care." He felt a lump in his throat. "It means a lot to me too," he said quietly. They walked to the edge of the park, and he watched as the child disappeared down the sidewalk, small and fragile against the city's tall buildings. He stood there for a long moment, feeling something shift inside him. The day had started like any other, but it had ended with a sense of purpose and a spark of hope that he had not felt in months. Walking back to his apartment, he thought about what he had learned. The child had almost nothing, yet had given him a gift far greater than any material possession. A reminder that life was about connection, sharing, and caring for others. It was a lesson that no amount of money could teach. When he reached his apartment, he did not immediately sit at his desk or check emails. Instead, he went to the window, looking out at the city lights once more. Everything seemed different now. The noise of the city felt alive, filled with stories and possibilities he had ignored. He realized that he had been living in a bubble, missing out on the small joys and quiet moments that made life rich in a way money never could. That night, he lay in bed thinking about the child, the shared sandwich, the walk in the park, and the words that had stayed with him. "It's all I have. We can share." He understood that sharing did not always mean giving away possessions. Sometimes it meant giving time, attention, and care. It meant being present, and he vowed to do that more, starting with this small, courageous child who had unknowingly touched his heart. The next days followed a similar pattern. Each evening he found himself returning to the park, eager to see the child, eager to hear stories, and eager to simply be present. They played small games, shared food, and explored corners of the park that he had never noticed before. The millionaire began to feel a sense of fulfillment he had thought was lost forever. The child's laughter became a melody that lightened his heart, and in return, he shared small comforts, stories, and guidance, offering stability and care that the child had been missing. Over time, their bond deepened. The child began to trust him more, speaking openly about fears, dreams, and hopes for the future. He listened with patience, sometimes offering advice, sometimes simply nodding and letting the child speak. And each time he felt a piece of his own heart heal, slowly mending the wounds of loneliness and heartbreak. Through these shared moments, he realized that wealth without connection was empty, and that even the smallest acts of kindness could change lives in ways unimaginable. The child had given him a gift of perspective, and in return he found a renewed sense of purpose. Together they discovered that life's true richness was measured not by what one had, but by what one could give, share, and experience with another heart. Days passed, and their routine became something both looked forward to. Each evening he would make his way to the park, unsure what he would find but hopeful for a small connection. The child was often there first, waiting with a quiet patience that amazed him. Sometimes they played simple games. Sometimes they walked in silence, watching the city around them. But every moment shared felt important, small but meaningful. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the buildings, the child looked up at him and asked, "Do you ever get scared of being alone?" He paused before answering, surprised at the question. "Yes," he said softly. "Even with everything I have, I get scared of being alone. It's one of the hardest things to handle." The child nodded thoughtfully. "I get scared too," the child said. "But it feels better when someone is with you, even for a little while." That simple statement struck him deeply. All the money, all the success in the world could not replace the comfort of another presence. He realized that for months he had avoided people, believing wealth could shield him from pain. Now, in the company of this small, resilient child, he began to understand that human connection was irreplaceable. He began to bring small things to share with the child. Sometimes it was a warm drink, sometimes a book, sometimes a small toy. The child never asked for these things. They accepted them gratefully, appreciating not just the item but the thought behind it. He began to see that giving without expectation created a bond deeper than anything he had known before. And the child in turn shared stories, laughter, and moments of insight that made him think differently about life. One afternoon, as they sat on the grass near the fountain, the child asked, "Why do people give up on each other?" He thought about it carefully. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "people focus too much on themselves, or they get hurt and they stop trusting. But it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes if we try again, we can make new connections." The child nodded, considering his words. "I want to try," the child said. "I want to believe that people care." He felt a surge of protectiveness and tenderness. Here was someone so young, so vulnerable, yet so willing to trust again despite the difficulties of life. It reminded him of his own broken heart and the walls he had built. Perhaps he too needed to try again. Not with someone he had loved, but with life itself, with connection and with care. Over time, he noticed small changes in the child. The hesitant steps, the nervous glances, the quiet demeanor all started to give way to a little more confidence. The child would smile more, ask questions more freely, and even initiate conversations. It was a subtle, almost invisible growth, but it filled him with pride and hope. He realized that presence, attention, and kindness could transform lives quietly but powerfully. One rainy evening, they sat under a large tree with a small umbrella shielding them from the drizzle. The child shivered slightly and he offered his coat. "I have more than I need," he said gently. "Take this and stay warm." The child hesitated, looking at him, then smiled and accepted it. "It's big," the child said softly, hugging the coat around. "But it's okay. It feels like you care." That moment stayed with him long after the rain stopped. It was not about the coat, not about the shelter, but about the recognition, the acknowledgement that someone cared. And in return, he felt something he had not felt in years. The warmth of being needed, the joy of making a difference, and the humility of understanding that the simplest acts could carry profound meaning. As days turned into weeks, they shared more than food and games. They shared stories, small secrets, and moments of reflection. The child would sometimes talk about fears of being alone, worries about school, and hopes for the future. He listened patiently, sometimes giving advice, sometimes just nodding, always present. And slowly he began to notice the effect these moments had on himself. His heart, once closed off and heavy, was beginning to open again. The laughter, curiosity, and trust of the child acted like a gentle balm, soothing the hurt and loneliness he had carried. One day, while sitting near the fountain, the child asked him, "Do you have anyone to talk to at home?" He paused, then shook his head. "Not really," he admitted. "I used to, but now I spend a lot of time alone. It's safer, I think, the child looked puzzled. But don't you get sad? Yes, he admitted. I get sad and lonely, and sometimes I forget what it means to care about someone. But being with you, it reminds me. The child smiled faintly, as if understanding something important without words. I like that, the child said softly. I like when we are together. It makes everything easier. That evening, as he walked back to his apartment, he thought about the paradox of life. The child had almost nothing, yet carried hope, trust, and courage that many adults lacked. And he, with everything money could buy, was learning to feel again, to care again, to be human again. He realized that wealth without love and connection was empty, but even the smallest human bonds could fill that emptiness in ways unimaginable. He started thinking about the future, not about money or deals, but about how he could be present in the child's life. Could he ensure safety, education, comfort, and guidance? Could he offer stability without overstepping, without taking away the child's independence? The questions were complex, but he felt ready to try, motivated not by obligation, but by genuine care and affection. In the evenings, they continued their walks, their talks, and their shared meals. Sometimes they would sit quietly, watching the sun set behind the buildings, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. In those moments, no words were needed. They shared a silence filled with understanding, trust, and the comforting knowledge that someone cared deeply about the other. The child began to ask about his life, too. "Do you like your job?" the child asked one day, curiosity in the voice. He smiled ruefully. "I do it well, but it doesn't make me happy. I realized happiness isn't about work or money. It's about moments like this, sharing and caring." The child nodded. "I like moments like this, too," the child said softly, and he felt a wave of warmth, the kind that filled the chest and made eyes glisten. He understood fully now. It was the connection, the shared presence, the caring for another being, that truly mattered. One day, the child stumbled upon a small puddle and laughed as they jumped over it, splashing water everywhere. He laughed too, the sound free and genuine echoing in the quiet park. It was a small moment, almost trivial, but for him it was a revelation. Joy could be found in simplicity, in laughter, in shared experiences that had nothing to do with money or possessions. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the park grew quiet, he realized that the days with the child had become the most meaningful part of his life. The heartache and loneliness that once seemed insurmountable were slowly being replaced by hope, connection, and the understanding that even the smallest gestures could heal wounds and create happiness. The child had given him a gift greater than wealth, the gift of rediscovered humanity, compassion, and purpose. He returned home that night with a sense of peace he had not known in months. The city lights, once distant and cold, now seemed warm and full of life. The noise, once overwhelming, now felt like the rhythm of countless stories waiting to be shared, and he knew that his journey with the child was only beginning, that together they would continue to learn, grow, and heal in ways neither could have imagined alone. The child had opened a door to a life of meaning, connection, and shared joy, and he was ready to walk through it fully, embracing the lessons of love, trust, and humanity that had been quietly waiting for him all along. The days continued to pass, each one bringing them closer. Their bond grew quietly, without grand gestures or formal promises. They shared meals, walks, and long conversations about small things. And in those small things, the millionaire found a sense of peace he had not known in years. The child seemed to grow more confident with each passing day, eyes brighter, voice steadier, and a smile that had started to linger more and more. One afternoon, while sitting under a large oak tree, the child looked up at him and asked, "Do you ever feel scared about the future?" He considered the question carefully. "Yes," he admitted. "I have everything I could want, but I still feel scared sometimes. I worry that I will lose people, or that I will never find someone to truly connect with." The child nodded, then said simply, "I think the future is better when someone cares for you. Even if it's small, it helps." Those words resonated deeply. He realized that the child, despite having very little, understood something he had struggled to grasp for years, that caring, even in small ways, could change everything. It was a lesson that money could never teach. He felt a strong urge to protect, nurture, and be there for this small human who had opened his eyes to what truly mattered. In the following weeks, he started to bring more than just food and small treats. He brought books with colorful pictures and stories that sparked imagination. He brought paper and pencil so they could draw together, sitting on the grass creating worlds only they could see. The child's eyes lit up with each gift, not because of its material value, but because of the thought, care, and attention that accompanied it. The millionaire began to understand that giving without expectation was one of life's most profound joys. One rainy day, he saw the child sitting under the small roof of a park bench, shivering. He ran to the nearest cafe, bought a warm drink and a small sandwich, and returned to hand it to the child. "Here," he said softly. "This will keep you warm and fed." The child accepted it gratefully, wrapping hands around the cup. "Thank you," the child whispered, eyes full of appreciation. "It's nice that you care." He felt a lump in his throat, realizing that his presence alone was already changing the child's world. And in return, the child's trust and openness were changing his own heart. He had begun to feel a warmth he had thought lost forever, a joy born not from money or luxury, but from simple human connection. One evening, as the city lights reflected on the wet streets, the child asked about his life. "Do you live alone?" He nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "Yes, I live alone. I used to have someone, but now, it's just me." The child looked down for a moment, then said, "It must be lonely." He sighed. "It is. But being with you helps me forget the loneliness, even if just for a little while." The child smiled softly, understanding without words. It was this understanding, this silent connection that filled the spaces his wealth had never reached. He realized that life was not about money, cars, or luxurious apartments. It was about moments like these, about being present, about sharing even the smallest joys. They began to explore more of the park together, noticing details they had overlooked before. The flowers blooming in quiet corners, the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, and the soft sounds of the city blending with nature. Each discovery, no matter how small, became a shared adventure, and each adventure brought laughter, conversation, and connection. One day the child spoke about school, about struggles with classmates and challenges in learning. He listened attentively, offering encouragement and gentle advice. "You are stronger than you think," he said. "Even when things are hard, you can do it. And I'll be here to help you whenever I can." The child's eyes brightened. "Really?" the child asked, hope flickering in the gaze. He nodded. "Really. I promise." From that day on, he made it a point to support the child in practical ways. He arranged for extra books, materials for school projects, and even small tutoring sessions. It was not about showing off wealth or control. It was about giving opportunities that had previously been unavailable. And the child responded with eagerness, curiosity, and a growing sense of confidence. As time passed, their relationship deepened. The millionaire shared more about his own life. Not the work, the money, or the luxury, but the feelings of loss, loneliness, and the struggle to find meaning. The child listened quietly, never judging, always offering comfort in small ways. A hand on his shoulder, a thoughtful question, a shared laugh. He realized that this simple trust and acceptance was more healing than anything he had experienced in years. One evening, sitting near the fountain as the sun set, the child asked, "Do you think happiness can last?" He thought about it for a long moment. "I think happiness is not about lasting all the time," he said gently. "It's about moments like this. And if you collect enough of them, you can build a life that feels full." The child nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "I like that," the child said softly. It was in these shared moments that he realized how much he had been missing in life. Wealth had given him comfort, but it had never given him meaning. It had never given him a reason to feel vulnerable, to care deeply, or to experience trust. And now, through this small, courageous child, he was learning all of these things again, slowly, gently. His heart was healing. The child began to talk about dreams for the future, going to school without fear, having friends, and maybe even one day helping others. He encouraged those dreams, offering practical support when he could, but also emotional support, listening, validating, and celebrating the child's courage. Together, they created a safe space, a small world where both could be themselves, share and grow. One afternoon, as they were drawing together on the grass, the child looked up at him and said, "I think I can do anything if you are here." He felt tears welling up, quickly blinking them away. "And I think I can face life better because you trust me," he said softly. It was a reciprocal bond, unspoken but deeply felt. Both were giving and receiving, learning and healing, discovering that care and love were not measured by wealth or possessions but by presence, attention and genuine affection. Evenings became a time of reflection for him. Walking home, he thought about the path that had led him here, the heartbreak, the loneliness, the empty apartment. He realized that life had a way of teaching the most important lessons in unexpected ways, often through those who seemed to have the least. The child, small and vulnerable, had taught him the power of empathy, kindness, and shared humanity. He also started to notice changes in himself beyond his emotional healing. He began reaching out to old friends, reconnecting in small ways, sharing moments of genuine care. The child's trust had reminded him that life was richer when shared. And with each reconnection, he felt more grounded, more connected, more human. The child's presence brought a rhythm to his life, a sense of purpose and responsibility that went beyond wealth or status. He began to prioritize time, attention, and care, realizing that these were the things that truly mattered. And the child, in return, thrived under this guidance, learning to trust, dream, and hope in ways that had seemed impossible before. One chilly evening, they sat on the park bench wrapped in warm jackets, watching the stars begin to appear. The child leaned slightly against him and said, "I feel safe when you are here." He felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of gratitude, love, and determination. "And I will always try to be here," he replied gently. It was a promise not just of presence but of care, guidance, and shared life. He knew that this bond was changing both of them in ways that would last a lifetime. And in that quiet moment, with the city lights below and the stars above, he understood fully that wealth was nothing without connection, and that even the smallest gestures, the smallest moments, could carry the greatest meaning. Their lives were intertwined now, not by contracts or obligations, but by shared trust, love, and humanity. And each day, each evening, each simple act of sharing and caring became a step toward healing, growth, and a life filled with meaning beyond measure. As weeks turned into months, the bond between the millionaire and the child grew stronger. Each day brought new moments of connection, new experiences, and a deepening trust that neither had anticipated. They had become a quiet presence in each other's lives, a source of comfort, laughter, and hope. The millionaire had come to understand that true wealth was not measured by possessions or money, but by love, care, and shared experiences. One afternoon, as they walked through the park, the child asked, "Do you ever think about the future?" He smiled, looking down at the small face full of curiosity and hope. "All the time," he said. "But now the future doesn't feel scary. It feels full of possibilities because I know I'm not alone." The child nodded. "I like that," the child said. "I think I can dream bigger now." It was a simple conversation, but it held a depth that only they could understand. The millionaire realized that his own life had been transformed just as much as the child's. The sadness, loneliness, and heartbreak he had carried for months were slowly replaced by purpose, joy, and the realization that he could make a real difference. Over time, he began to take more practical steps to help the child. He arranged for the child to have better school supplies, books, and even extra lessons to help with learning. He consulted with teachers and tutors to ensure the child could thrive academically and emotionally. The child's eyes sparkled with excitement and gratitude for these opportunities, but even more for the care, attention, and support that accompanied them. One day, the child hesitated before asking a question that had been lingering for a while. "Do you think maybe I could live with you someday?" He felt a sudden wave of emotion, his heart racing with both excitement and fear. He wanted to protect the child, give a safe and stable home, and ensure that the child never felt abandoned again. Yet he also knew that such a decision required care, thought, and preparation. "We will figure it out," he said gently. "I promise I will do everything I can to make sure you are safe, happy, and supported." The child smiled, a mixture of hope and trust shining through. "I believe you," the child whispered. From that day on, he dedicated himself even more to the child's well-being. He realized that true care went beyond momentary gestures. It required commitment, consistency, and presence. Each day he worked to ensure that the child felt secure, supported, and loved, while also allowing space for independence, growth, and learning. Their routine continued: meals, walks, shared stories, and quiet moments of reflection. Yet now, There was a new depth, a recognition that their bond had the power to shape both their futures. He found himself looking forward to each day with a sense of purpose and anticipation he had not felt in years. The child, too, began to dream more freely, imagining a future where learning, friends, and happiness were within reach. One chilly evening, as they sat on a bench wrapped in jackets, the child leaned slightly against him. "I feel safe with you," the child said softly. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, the kind that could not be bought or earned through work. "And I promise," he said quietly, "that I will always try to be here for you." The words were a promise not just of presence, but of care, guidance, and shared life. He understood fully now that this relationship was transforming both of them. The child's trust and hope had given him a reason to open his heart again, to feel joy, empathy, and connection. And he, in turn, was giving the child stability, guidance, and a vision of what life could be when someone truly cared. As time went on, he found ways to expand the child's experiences. They visited museums, went on small trips around the city, and explored parks and neighborhoods they had never noticed before. Each experience, no matter how ordinary, became a shared adventure. Laughter, curiosity, and learning filled their days. And in those moments, the city itself seemed to transform, becoming a place of opportunity, wonder, and growth. One afternoon, as they sat by a small fountain watching the water sparkle in the sunlight, the child said, "I want to help others someday, like you helped me." He felt a lump in his throat, touched by the child's compassion and empathy. "You can," he said gently, "and I will help you learn how." It was in these quiet exchanges that he realized the true impact of connection, empathy, and care. The child's innocence, courage, and willingness to trust had rekindled something in him he thought he had lost forever. The ability to hope, to care, and to find meaning beyond himself. And in return, he was teaching the child skills, values, and lessons that would shape a bright, hopeful future. Evenings became times of reflection and quiet bonding. They would sit together, sometimes talking, sometimes sharing a comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle and the stars emerge. The millionaire found that these moments of calm, trust, and shared presence were more fulfilling than any luxury he had ever experienced. They were moments of true wealth, emotional, human, and profound. One day, after months of growing together, he finally made the decision to offer the child a more permanent sense of security. He spoke gently, carefully explaining that he wanted the child to have a stable home, access to education, and a place where the child would always feel safe and loved. The child's eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and joy filling the gaze. "You really mean it?" the child asked softly. "Yes," he said, taking the child's small hand in his. "It's all I have to give, but I want to share it with you. I want you to have a life full of hope, learning, and love." Tears glistened in the child's eyes, and a small, heartfelt smile spread across the face. "Thank you," the child whispered. "I don't know what to say." He smiled gently, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment and connection. "You don't need to say anything. Just know that you are cared for, always." From that day on, their lives intertwined more fully. They continued to explore, learn, laugh, and grow together. The millionaire found that his heart, once heavy and closed, was now open and healing. The child thrived under his guidance, trust, and support, growing more confident, joyful, and hopeful with each passing day. He realized fully now that life's true richness was not measured by wealth, success, or material possessions. It was measured by the love, care, and shared moments between hearts. And in the small, courageous child who had trusted him so completely, he had discovered the greatest treasure of all, the power of connection, compassion, and the simple transformative act of sharing what one has. Evening after evening, they would sit quietly, reflecting on the day, sharing stories, and dreaming of the future. The city around them continued its bustling rhythm, but inside their shared world there was peace, understanding, and the deep comfort of being seen and valued. The millionaire had finally found a sense of purpose beyond wealth, a reason to feel, to hope, and to love again. In the end, it was not the luxury apartments, the expensive cars, or the piles of money that mattered. It was the shared laughter, the small acts of kindness, the trust, and the presence of someone who mattered deeply. And in the child's voice, the gentle words of trust, and the shared moments of life, he had discovered the meaning of true wealth, love, connection, and the gift of sharing what one has, no matter how small, with another human heart.